Hi everyone, I'm Paula Harvey at Tejon Ranch Conservancy, and we're going to begin a series of 4 lessons, all involved in lesson 6, which is about making field journals. So let's get started, shall we? So lesson 6, part 1 of 4 parts, a collection or field guide. We're going to focus on the scientific concept of patterns. So let's talk a bit about patterns right now. Nature, full of patterns, and scientists use patterns to help them group or categorize different species, or to use as clues for underlying processes or forces at work. A pattern exists when a set of numbers, colors, shapes, sounds are repeated. Patterns can be found everywhere in animals, plants, rocks, the solar system. Some specific patterns are called fractals or spirals. Fractals are patterns that repeat but at a different scale. When you're studying or looking for patterns, keep these questions in mind while you're doing your journaling. Ask yourself, what patterns do you notice? How can you describe the pattern? Are there exceptions to that pattern? What might be causing the pattern? And what does the pattern remind you of? Some things with patterns. Spirals, as we already talked about, fractals, branching patterns, the patterns that plants take on with their leaf structure. Things found under rocks, 120-degree angles, patterns made by melting snow, animal or plant camouflage, tracks in mud, signs of the season, flowers, orb spider webs, feathers, and on and on and on. These are just a few examples of things that can have patterns. So in this lesson, we're going to create a field guide of 3 to 5 things that we can see patterns in. You'll make that field guide that shows patterns. You'll include 3 to 5 things. You'll arrange the page so that you have your ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and a picture, diagram, or sketch. And in it, you're going to be paying attention to the similarities and differences of those 3 or 5 things that you're studying and patterns. So before we begin with your assignment, let's talk about field guides. It's a good idea to be familiar with what a field guide looks like, what it has in it. So they're useful tools to help you to identify things out in the field, to learn about plants, animals, rocks, any part of nature that has a specific area. So I'm going to show you some pictures of some pages in a variety of field guides that I have. And I want you to consider how those pages are arranged. How a field guide is set up may determine how its usefulness. If it isn't set up or organized in a way that's useful to you, it's not going to be a tool that you're going to use. Typically, a guide's going to show you a picture or drawing of each of the subjects, and then something about its life or its natural history. It will oftentimes show different stages in the development of that plant or animal. It'll include narrative writing about what you're studying, and it will also include maps to show the distribution and location. That's extremely important. If I'm looking at a bird that looks very similar to 6 or 7 other birds, I'm going to look at that map and see whether the bird I think it is actually occurs in the area that I'm in. If it doesn't, then I'm looking at a different species. So a map is vital. All right, let's take a look at some examples. This is a foldable pamphlet. It's called a pocket guide, and I have 3 examples of this that I'm going to show you. It's something you can take out in the field. It has a limited number of subjects, so So identification is very quick. However, because it's limited, you may be missing out on what actual animal it is. It may not actually be on your field guide. There's very little information included with the picture, just enough to identify the animal, but you would probably want to get back home and do further research to find out more about its natural history. Here is a field guide with 300 or 400 pages about the same subject, in this case, dragonflies. And this book has, for example, on this picture, this is one species of dragonfly. And you'll notice on the left side there is a map. The blue is where you would find that dragonfly. And then it also shows male and female because they look different. It also describes it in great detail. So there's a lot of narrative as well as the photograph, as well as the map. And then something about its natural history, where it lives, how it behaves, and that kind of thing. All of that information is not only interesting, but helpful and valuable in identifying the actual animal that you're studying. Here's another pocket guide. This one is of backyard birds. So I'm using this, and these birds are definitely in my backyard. I use this oftentimes when I see a bird to see if this is one that I can find quickly. If not, then I'm going to use my field guide as opposed to this pocket guide. But again, it has drawings of the birds and then the name of it, but it's very generalized. So if there are any subspecies, you're not going to see those in there. It's just a start. Here is a field guide that I do use, has 450 pages. It includes maps of the distribution, and in this case, because it's birds and they migrate, it shows different colors, which shows the area that it migrates to, the area it spends the summer in, the area that it breeds and nests in. So these maps are rather complex. But you'll notice, if you look at the pictures, that there's several of the same type of bird, the nuthatch, and there are several different varieties. So it's really important to be able to read about the animal as well as look at the distribution of the map and have a really good picture that shows the detail of its markings. Also notice that one of the descriptions on a field guide of birds is its voice, the different ways that it sings and alerts it alerts other birds. So here's the same field guide, but I've chosen two different pages in two different sections. You can tell, right, how this particular book is set up, what the sections are like. Insects, the hugest category of animals on the planet. And so obviously this is going to be a book that has to organize itself in a way that helps me or you find the animals. And this is a field guide to plants, and in my opinion, not a particularly good one, although the drawings are wonderful. So, but it's not particularly organized in a way that is useful to me. I've kept the book because the drawings are so good, but I actually have never used this particular field guide. And here's a pocket guide to animal tracks. So again, it's small, foldable, easy to carry. You can just put it in your back pocket, but very limited information. And let me give you an example. In California, there's 3 different kinds of elk that live here. In this pocket guide, it shows one picture of an elk. I'm not actually sure which kind that is. So this is a start. But if you really want to know about animal tracks, you're going to want a field guide similar to this one. So this is 4 pages just on the pocket gopher, another large, hefty book. But look at all the information that this author, Jim Lowry, put into this book. There is a map on the lower right-hand side showing the distribution of where this animal can be found. It shows the trails and patterns that you'll see in the dirt if you're looking for pocket gophers. So if you're walking along and you see that picture, you see that trail in the dirt, you're going to go, what animal made that? Well, now you know, you can look in here and you'll see, oh, that's a pocket gopher. Or if you see its tracks, upper left-hand side, the front and the rear foot. But right below it, it shows the gait. So when the animal is walking, if its gait looks similar to that, that too will help you to identify that animal. Then the author has shown photographs of those prints, but also has shown the bottom of the animal's feet so you can see what actually makes it. Very useful piece of information. And then a lot of information about that animal, its natural history, just tons of information. So now it's going to be your turn to make a mini field guide. You're only going to select 3 to 5 things that are of a similar thing, like could be certain types of insects, maybe it's beetles or butterflies, or maybe it's going to be different kinds of bird feathers. I chose flowers, and I'll show you my sample in a minute, but you're going to choose one subject that you can find 3 to 5 different examples of that you can journal. All right, when you do that, think about how you're going to arrange that page to show ABC 1, 2, 3 and your picture, and that you're going to focus on when you say, I notice, I wonder, this reminds me of, what are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences that you see in the different organisms that you had studied, and also to identify the patterns that you're seeing. Remember always, you start your journal entry with your metadata. That's including the day, the date, the time, your location and habitat, and the weather. And any other information, including who you're with. If you're journaling with somebody, that always helps you to remember that event as well. Okay, planning your page. Now it's not random. Now you're really planning this out. You have several things that you're studying in one journal entry. And so always start with your heading and then the title. In this case, you might want to write field journal or field guide patterns. And if you're studying 3 objects, create enough space for all 3. Maybe you want to actually divide your page into 3 different equal sections. That's one way to do it. It's not the only way to do it. If you're doing more than 3, you're probably going to need both sides of the paper. So you might want to open your journal all the way up and use both sides and have a larger piece. And again, how are you going to divide it up? You don't have to have all of them being equal size. You could have one that's really large and one that's really small. It's all interesting to the eye. Then remember, always include those ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and that sketch diagram or drawing. And also consider that each time you're studying something, try and do it in the same order. I'll explain that a little more when I show you mine. After you've done that journal entry, then you're going to turn the page and do your reflection questions, which you will again turn into a paragraph. So here's my journal entry, and you'll notice that my pictures and my sections are not completely equal in size. First one's larger, the last one's the smallest. But in it, I put everything in the same order. So the very top has my metadata, and then I have my title, field guide patterns. Then I boxed the names of the 3 flowers that I did, and I boxed them exactly the same. In fact, I used a little yellow pen to brighten it up a little bit, and again, exactly the same. So I really distinctively made 3 different sections. I start out by doing some of my 1, 2, 3s. So you'll see diameters 5 centimeters, the petals, there are 8, and they're 2 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide. So I did my measurements right away. When you look at the black hollyhock, same thing. Petals are 4 centimeters long, 4 centimeters wide. And also on both of those, they had ridges. So I counted the ridges on the flowers and I wrote that down. Again, that's the 1, 2, 3s. The snapdragon was different. It's not a symmetrical flower the way the first 2 are. I did that on purpose. I wanted to show one that was a very different kind of flower, and boy, that was hard to draw. I had to kind of take it apart a little. I didn't destroy the flower, but I kind of pulled it here and there, and I discovered that there were actually only 3 petals on that. And the bottom petal is the one that's so interesting because it's large and it has 3 lobes. So rather than writing what the length and diameter of the petals were, I couldn't do that because it's asymmetrical. So, but I still measured it. So 3 centimeters long, 2 centimeters wide. So I put in my measurements right after I identified the flower. And I put them in exactly the same place. So someone looking at my journal, if they wanted that information, it was right there. Then I wrote in my I notices, I wonders, and this reminds me of. As I've done before, and is my practice, I underline I notice, I wonder, and this reminds me of, so that it's easy to find it and know what that I notice is the narrative, the description. I wonder are my questions. This reminds me of is that connection that I made. Notice to the right of the cosmos flower, there's a little box that's colored. And then right below and to the right of the black hollyhock, there is a bunch of boxes of different colors. What I was doing, and this is also very common that journalers will do, I took my pencils and I started drawing a little sample of the color to see if it matched what I was studying. And that's what you're seeing there, and you can do that as well, so that you have some idea of the colors that you use. On the hollyhock, that is a layered color. So I've got a bunch of different colors on there. I've got some red in there, some purple, something called black grape. I have a little tiny bit of yellow and some white. There's a bunch of different colors that I layered on top because it's a very complex color altogether. All right, so I think I've covered everything that I did on mine. Now, remember also, your journal is yours, not mine, and you're going to create it in a way that works for you and that you like. But be very conscious now that you're talking about studying 3 to 5 different things and having enough space to cover them all, and try to include the same kinds of information on each of them, because you want to look at the pattern. The pattern for the cosmos is this repeated 8-petal pattern. The pattern for the hollyhock are these 5 petals that are interestingly overlapping. And then the snapdragon has this very odd and unusual shape, which completely defies that same pattern that the first 2 have. All right, so now it's time for you to do your journal entry. Remember to focus on patterns. Remember ABC 1, 2, 3 and the picture. Take 45 minutes to 1 hour to do all of your subjects. That means you're going to move fast. You might spend 10 to 15 minutes on each thing that you're studying. You don't want to take days and days and days to do this. And when you finish with it, come back. You're going to pause this video here, come back and answer the questions, the reflection questions, which are all based on pattern this time. And you're going to do the same thing that we did before, question answer form, topic sentence and an ending sentence, put it all together into one coherent scientific paragraph. Have fun out there. See you in a little while. Hi, everybody. You're back from doing your journaling. So now let's just review how to do your reflection questions. I know that some of you have a real challenge in doing this writing, but if you remember that most of the answer is part of what was in the question, it should become a lot easier. You just have to think about little things, not the entire big thing. So, question answer form, put as many words from the question into your answer. Remember, what state do you live in? The state I live in is California. Answer all the questions first. Just scribble them down on the next page of your journal. Answer them in question answer form, and then put numbers by them, which would be the first question or the first answer that you'd want to put in, and the second answer and the third answer. Put them in order just by putting a little number by each one. And then start with a topic sentence and end with the closing sentence when you do your final paragraph. So you take all of those answers, put them in the order you want just by writing them out, but start with a topic sentence, and I've given you one. If you want to use mine, you can, and then end with a closing summarizing sentence. So you begin with a topic sentence that says something like, what is it you were doing? I created a field guide focusing on patterns. Simple. And then the ending sentence. It was interesting to discover the similarities and differences in each of the subjects I studied. Because remember, that's what your assignment was. Look at the similarities and differences. So here are your questions. I'm going to just coach you really quickly on how you start the question answer form. What did you notice that was interesting to you as you made your field guide? I noticed that, and then you can say what it was interesting as I made my field guide. Or you could say, something that was interesting to me while I made my field guide was. That's question answer form. Second one, what cool questions did you come up with? One cool question I came up with was simple. And all you have to do is go back in your journal and see what your I wonder was. You've already made the question, so it's not hard to come up with this answer. What are some similarities and differences among the subjects you recorded in your field guide? You could say, some of the similarities were, and then write them. Some of the differences were, and write them. Or you could say, one similarity that I found among the subjects I recorded in my field guide was, and one of the differences among the subjects that I recorded in my field guide was. The next one, what are some possible explanations for the similarities and differences you saw? One possible explanation for the similarity of, and then name what that is, was, and then explain what you think that possible explanation could be. It doesn't have to be the right answer. It can be, it is that, could it be, that hypothesis. And again, one of the possible explanations for the difference that I saw, which was, and then name it, could be, and then answer that question. Last question, are there any features or structures that are shared by your subjects, and describe them? One feature that is shared by my subjects is, and then describe it. And you said I noticed, so you already, all you have to do is copy down what you wrote. One of the structures that I noticed in my subject was, and then again, describe that. All right, so those were your questions. I gave you your topic sentence and your ending sentence, so your paragraph should take you 10 minutes to write, if that. And that becomes your reflection. Don't forget to write reflection on it. And also don't forget to put this journal entry and the page numbers into your table of contents. Next time, we're going to do another field guide, but this time we're going to do it on cause and effect. So, example, there's a hole in a leaf. What caused it? How did that affect the leaf? Did the leaf die, or did the leaf continue to grow, or did it grow a scab around the hole? That would be cause and effect. Start looking around for interesting subjects so that the next time you'll come, you'll be ready to do your field guide on cause and effect. We'll see you next time. Enjoy yourselves. Bye.